and will not be delivered. And that is why I urge everyone in this House to recognise our first duty is to the principle that underpins this place.
Said no. The Right Honourable Gentleman is responding to the debate, and he will do so to a conclusion. Mr. Michael Gove.
Our first duty to our constituents and to our country is to keep our promises. This House said that we would honour that referendum mandate. The time has come. And the question that all of us must answer when we return to our constituencies is, did you vote to break the deadlock? Did you vote to end the division of these days? Did you vote to bring the country together? I know that members across this House will support the government this afternoon to do just that.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the questions...
Well, I am indeed putting the question. I'm extremely grateful. The question is that Amendment A be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Aye. Division! Clear the lobby. You too. Order. The question is that Amendment A be made. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
Tellers for the ayes, Thangham Debonair and Matt Weston. Tellers for the noes, Mr. Stuart Andrew and Mr. Ian Stewart. a lock the doors! Order! Order!
Go on, Boris. You'll let it feed Red.
The ayes to the right, 322. The noes to the left, 306.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 322. The noes to the left, 306. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. Order. The question is, colleagues, that the motion as amended be agreed to. As many as other opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. We now come to motion number 2. I remind the House that I've selected the manuscript amendment in the name of Peter Kyle and others. Minister or whip on duty to move formally. Not moved.
Shame.
Thank you. Order. Point of order, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to you. I'm very grateful to the House of Commons staff, everybody who's put themselves out, everybody who's come to give up their time in this debate today. It's been a very important debate, an exceptional moment for our country, an exceptional moment for our Parliament. Alas, the opportunity to have a meaningful vote has effectively been passed up because the meaningful vote has been voided of meaning. But I wish the House to know that I'm not daunted or dismayed by this particular result, and I think it probably became likely once it was obvious that the amendment from my right honourable friend, the member for West Dorset, was going to remain on the order paper. I continue in the very strong belief that the best thing for the UK and for the whole of Europe is for us to leave with this new deal on October the 31st. And to anticipate the questions that are coming from the benches opposite, I will not negotiate a delay with the EU. And neither does the law compel me to do so. I will tell our friends and colleagues in the EU exactly what I've told everyone in the last 88 days that I've served as Prime Minister, that further delay would be bad for this country, bad for our European Union, and bad for democracy. So next week, the government will introduce the legislation needed for us to leave the EU with our new deal on October the 31st. And I hope that our European Union colleagues and friends will not be attracted, as benches opposite are, or rather I should say the front bench is, by delay. I don't think that they will be attracted by delay. And I hope that then, honourable members, faced with a choice of our new deal for the UK and the European Union, will change their minds, because it was pretty close today. I hope that they will change their minds and support this deal in overwhelming numbers. Since I became Prime Minister, I've said we must get on and get Brexit done on October the 31st so that this country can move on. Mr. Speaker, that policy remains unchanged. No delays, and I will continue to do all I can to get Brexit done on October the 31st, and I continue to commend this excellent deal, Mr. Speaker, to the House.
Point of order, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome today's vote. Parliament has clearly spoken.
Order, apologies. The Prime Minister was heard. Yes, he was. Don't argue the toss with the chair. I'm telling you what the situation is, and everybody can detect. The Prime Minister was heard, and the Leader of the Opposition will be heard. It is as simple and unarguable as that. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome today's vote. It's an emphatic decision by this House that has declined to back the Prime Minister's deal today and clearly voted to stop a no-deal crash-out from the European Union. The Prime Minister must now comply with the law. He can no longer use the threat of a no-deal crash-out to blackmail members to support his sell-out deal. Labour is not prepared to sell out the communities that we represent. We're not prepared to sell out their future. And we believe that ultimately the people must have the final say on Brexit, which actually only the Labour Party is offering. Today is an historic day for Parliament because it said it will not be blackmailed by a Prime Minister who is apparently prepared once again to defy a law passed by this Parliament. I invite him to think very carefully about the remarks he just made about refusing, apparently, to apply for the extension which the EU No. 2 Act requires him to do.
Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford. Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm most grateful. I think all of us in this House are aware of the responsibilities that we have. This is a crisis that we are in. And I'm thankful that the House has voted the way it has done on the amendment this afternoon. There is a clear expression from this House that we cannot crash out on the 31st of October. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask you what we can do to make sure that the Prime Minister respects the law of the land, that the Prime Minister respects the Benn Act and sends a letter to the European Council seeking that extension. And I wonder what we can do to make sure that the government does not bring forward a bill until that extension, as has been instructed, is delivered upon. And any failure of a Prime Minister who thinks he's above the law, well, Prime Minister, you'll find yourself in court.
I don't mean it in any spirit of discourtesy to the right honourable gentleman, but I think his contribution was rhetorical in the sense that I don't think he was particularly inviting my immediate response. If he was doing so, I would say to him that I think judicious consideration of these matters is always beneficial to colleagues across the House. Everybody, of course, must abide by the law. The right honourable gentleman is versatile, dexterous and experienced in the use of the parliamentary weaponry to try to ensure that his point of view prevails. So we'll leave it there for now. Point of order, Jo Swinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's deal was a bad deal, and the public deserve to have the final say, not just the hundreds of thousands who are marching outside, but the millions of people across our country.
I recognise there are very strongly held views on both sides of the House and on both sides of this debate. But the leader of the Liberal Democrats must be heard. And it is unconscionable if there is an attempt to stop someone being heard. Jo Swinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the people who are outside this building right now will be heard, and they deserve the final say, along with millions across the country. So the most urgent thing right now, Mr. Speaker, is that the Prime Minister complies with the law. And I ask your guidance, would it be possible to suspend the sitting for a short time to allow the Prime Minister to go and send his letter and come back and make a statement to the House to confirm that he has done so?
I'm grateful to the honourable lady. It is not my intention to suspend the sitting. The point will have been heard by the Prime Minister. I say to the honourable lady, all sorts of things are possible, but as to what is judged appropriate at this time, I think the puckish grin on the contours of the honourable lady's face suggests that she was making a point but not expecting such a decision. I'm grateful to her. Of course I will come to the... momentarily. Of course I will come to the honourable gentleman. A point of order, Sir Oliver Letwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say first of all to the Prime Minister that I actually agreed with what he said at the end there, and that I'm absolutely certain he will comply with the law. I want to say to friends and colleagues across the House who helped us achieve this amendment, which I believe to be profoundly in the national interest, that I'm very grateful for that cooperation, but that our ways are now going to part. Because for many of us on these benches who have cooperated in preventing a no-deal exit by putting in place or helping to put in place the Ben Act and helping to keep its insurance policy in place today, now when the Prime Minister brings the withdrawal implementation bill to the House of Commons, we will be voting for it. We will continue to vote for it. We will seek to ensure that it becomes the law before the 31st of October. And if it does so become the law, this country will leave on the 31st of October, of hope that I share with the Prime Minister, but it will do so on the basis of knowing that should anything go wrong, we will not crash out without a deal on that date.
I'm most grateful to the right honourable gentleman, and so will many members of the House for the clarity of his exposition. Well, people take their own view of it, but it's certainly clear and very pithy, and I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman. Point of order, Mr. Nigel Dodds.
This decision now will give further time for detailed consideration of the bill when it comes forward. It will also give an opportunity to consider in detail whatever amendments come forward. It has the effect of not approving this deal today. And of course, we will examine all the details of the bill and all amendments in the light of our overriding concern about the constitutional economic integrity of the Union. That is our priority. It will remain our priority in the days ahead, and that is the basis on which we will now proceed in a timely and sensible manner.
I'm grateful. Our proceeding, I hope the honourable gentleman will take it in the right spirit. If, having known him for over 20 years, I say that I feel that our proceedings would not be complete without a point of order from the honourable gentleman, the member for Stone, the chair of the European Scrutiny Committee. Well, somebody is suggesting a division, but I will not allow a division on that matter. Point of order, Sir William Cash.
There is much talk about the law of the land. The law of the land, as it stands at this moment in time, is quite simple. Section 1 of the Withdrawal Act 2018 categorically states that the European Communities Act is repealed on exit day, which is the 31st of October, just in case anyone can't read.
Well, he's grateful, and I'm sure the House will be indebted to the honourable gentleman for his legal exegesis. There are other views on that matter, but the honourable gentleman has registered his with his customary force. Point of order, Joanna Cherry.
Mr. Speaker,
if members who are leaving the chamber, I understand the disappointment of the honourable and learned lady, but I cannot compel members to remain. I cannot, to coin a phrase, take anybody hostage. I do not have the power to incarcerate. So I'm trying to be helpful to the honourable and learned lady. I'm playing for time. If members who, quite unaccountably, do not wish to listen to the honourable and learned lady would leave the chamber quickly and quietly, the rest of us, including assuredly the chair, wishing to hear the honourable lady, can do so. I think people are gradually beetling out of the chamber. If the chair of the Education Select Committee feels that he can beetle out and conduct his conversation outside, that will be very greatly appreciated by the chair. Thank you. Point of order, Joanna Cherry.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your indulgence. Viewers in Scotland are accustomed to the sight of the Tory benches emptying when speakers, members of Parliament representing Scottish seats get up, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing that in the SNP's party political broadcasts in the soon-to-come general election. But, Mr. Speaker, the point I want to make is an important one. The Prime Minister has failed to secure an approval of the withdrawal agreement today in terms of the Ben Act. And that means that under the law of this land, he should be retreating to number 10 to pen a letter to the European Union in terms of the Act and in terms of the undertakings, as so described by the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, the undertakings that he gave to the Scottish Court. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, we're back in court on Monday morning, and it will be possible then to secure the court's assistance if the Prime Minister has flouted the law and the promises he gave to the court. But, Mr Speaker, can I ask this? Should Scotland's Supreme Court mandate you to sign the letter required by the Act on behalf of this Parliament, will you do so? Thank you.
I'm grateful to the honourable and learned lady. I have no expectation of being so asked, and moreover I have no aspirations to the exalted status that would have been attained by a person so requested or indeed directed by the court. But the short answer to the honourable and learned lady is that if I were instructed by this House, I would do as instructed, and if I were directed or instructed by a court, I would do as directed. That is my instinctive reaction. I would, of course, seek further and better particulars. I would take advice, but I repeat, I haven't been asked, I'm not expecting to be asked, I'm not looking to be asked, but I would do as I was required to do, and I would have no hesitation in so doing. Yes, indeed. Point of order, Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I welcome the vote on this amendment because it shows that a majority of this House have stood up for more democracy, not less. They've stood up for more scrutiny, not less, and they have also voted to rule out a disastrous no deal. But I believe it will also give us a chance, Mr Speaker, to let the people have a final say as they're demanding outside here now, over 1 million of them, demanding that right. The Prime Minister has changed his own mind more times than we can possibly count, most recently on the issue of the border in the Irish Sea. It cannot be right that the British people are the only ones who are not allowed to change their minds, and I look forward to the opportunity that this vote affords us to come back to put whatever deal is in front of us to that confirmatory ballot.
To the honourable lady for a point of order. I say to her publicly what I said to her privately, that I'm sorry that on account of constraints of time and a desire to bring matters to a conclusion, I was not able to call her today in the debate, but she has at least had a mini speech in the form of her point of order, and I know that no power on earth would or should stop the honourable lady contributing frequently on future occasions, and I certainly look forward to that. Yes, very well. Point of order, Mr Vernon Coker.
Mr Speaker, is there any power that you have to enable this House and indeed the public to properly understand what the Prime Minister has actually just said to us? According to the law passed by this House, if a deal or no deal is not agreed, then there is a letter attached to that Act which the Prime Minister is required to send today, the 19th of October. Now, it may be my misunderstanding, Mr Speaker, but I have no idea from what the Prime Minister said as to whether he's actually going to write and sign that letter or whether he's not going to do that. If he's not going to do it, Mr Speaker, that means he is not complying with the law that has been passed by this House of Commons. Any of our constituents who don't comply with the law face the consequences. Is there anything that we can do to properly understand whether the Prime Minister intends to comply with the legislation and send a letter, or whether he's simply going to ignore it?
Well, my understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, I say that as a matter of some very considerable pride, is that the legal position is clear, and I don't dissent from what the honourable gentleman has just said about the legal position. Ministers have made, and I say this quite neutrally, a number of statements about adherence to or compliance with the so-called Benn Act. Those statements haven't always been immediately and obviously compatible with each other. I think we have to await the development of events. In general terms, it is of course true to say that ministers have emphasised their commitment to observe the law, including the Prime Minister has said that on a number of occasions. It is also true that the Prime Minister has indicated that he is not willing to seek an extension. My understanding of the legal position is the same as that of the honourable gentleman. I think that we must await the development of events The Honourable and Learned Lady from the Scottish National Party raised a similar concern about this matter. It has now been echoed by the Honourable Gentleman. Further enlightenment may follow when the Leader of the House uncoils, and addresses us from the dispatch box. I don't know. I'm not psychic. We shall see. But what I would say is I think that matters are coming to a conclusion today, but the House will sit on Monday, and I confidently anticipate that the Honourable Gentleman will be in his place and ready to leap to his feet with alacrity to advance his point of view and that of others. The Honourable Gentleman Member Horsham is shaking his head in a mildly eccentric manner. Not at me. Oh, indeed. Well, we're deeply grateful. I wasn't looking to call the Honourable Gentleman, though if he particularly wanted to raise a point of order, and especially as he used to be my constituent, far be it from me to deny him. Not a day. OK, fair enough. I think a point of order, the Leader of the House. Point of order, Mr Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In the light of today's decision, I should like to inform the House that Monday's business will now be a debate on a motion relating to Section 13(1)(b) of the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018, and I shall make a further business statement on Monday.
Well, I note what the Leader has said, and we will hear what others have to say. And a point of order, that's been done by the Honourable Gentleman on a point of order. On a point of order, the Shadow Leader of the House, Valerie Vaz.
Can I thank the Leader for making that point of order, and in response would like to ask him, through you, Mr Speaker, why we are having a rerun of the vote. If that's not the case, could the bill be published, and could the bill be debated in an orderly way? And thirdly, how discourteous is this to Her Majesty the Queen when we are still debating the Queen's speech? When are we likely to debate the remainder days of the Queen's speech?
Well, I note what the Honourable Lady says. Of course I'll come to the Honourable Gentleman. Point of order, Mr Beat Wishart.
I'm also grateful to the Leader of the House for announcing that additional piece of business on Monday, and I deeply share the concerns of the Honourable Lady when it comes to these issues. First of all, what's happening to the Queen's speech? What will now happen to the debates that's supposed to happen and the votes that we're going to be supposed to be concluding the Queen's speech on Tuesday and Wednesday? This is a huge discourtesy to the House. If the Right Honourable Gentleman wanted a vote on this government's deal, he could have had it 20 minutes ago. That was the right time to do it. We deserve some sort of explanation as to why this is being brought back on Monday so quickly without any conversation or discussions across usual channels and no discussions and debate at all with other parties in this House. I think he has to get back to his feet and explain a little bit more about what he's intending and why he never took advantage of the opportunity to have a vote on this just 20 minutes ago.
Point of order, Mr Kevin Brennan.
And on a point of order, Mr Speaker, shouldn't the Leader have sought to make an emergency business statement if that is what his intention was, so that we could do just what the Shadow Leader from the SNP has done and my honourable friend has just done, and ask questions of the Leader as to his intentions for what's happening to the rest of the important business we have before us?
So to that is yes. The short answer to that is yes, and I intend no discourtesy to the Leader of the House. It had been intimated to me, albeit not by the Right Honourable Gentleman, that in the event of the government being defeated on the Amendment A, it would be the Executive's intention to bring forward an emergency business statement. And although an emergency business statement is often narrow in its terms because it flows from a particular event on a given subject, it is susceptible of questioning. Whereas doing it on a point of order is most unusual and doesn't readily lend itself to questioning. And so, you know, it is, to be frank, unsatisfactory, but I don't intend any discourtesy to the Leader, and I'm quite certain that he thought that he was doing the right thing. He wouldn't knowingly do the wrong thing, but I think it is less than helpful in terms of the exchanges. And I will have to take advice and reflect on these matters further, because I did not receive advance notification of any length of the intention, still less of the intention to do it in this way. Yes, I will come to the right honourable gentleman, of course. Point of order, Mrs. Helen Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, in the light of the very brief remarks from the Leader of the House, I wondered whether it had been made clear to you when the second reading of the bill, which the Prime Minister said would be introduced, will take place, and which days next week we will have for the 2 days to complete debate and vote on the Queen's speech. That's the question.
Well, it would be, of course, most useful to have clarification on that matter. The clerk at the table is waving in front of me, most helpfully, I hasten to add, a helpful wave as opposed to an unhelpful wave, notice of presentation of bill, the European Union Withdrawal Agreement Bill, in the name of the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. I heard also, as the Honourable Lady did, the Prime Minister refer to the government's intention to introduce the withdrawal and implementation bill. It is perfectly open to the government to do that. Indeed, it is perfectly open to the government to do that next week. And I had anticipated or surmised that that might be the likely course of action for the government to follow, which would be an entirely reasonable course of action. But I'm not at this stage receiving any explicit indication that that is what the government intends to do on Monday. And this doesn't altogether assist the House. Colleagues can reflect further on these matters. A point of order, Mr. Pat McFadden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a slightly odd situation because the question that I want to ask, I'd really like to ask to the Leader of the House, but because he's not made a business statement, he's made a point of order, I find myself having to put it to you. I am, of course, very welcome if he wants to get to his feet to help us clarify matters. What I think a lot of us want to know about Monday is it your understanding, as I have to say, that the government intends to bring back a motion to approve the agreement struck with the European Union under Section 13(1)(b), or is it your understanding that they intend to bring back the legislation implementing that agreement?
Well, as things stand, at 3:17 on Saturday afternoon, I have heard what the Right Honourable Gentleman has heard. The government seems to be planning to bring forward a vote under the relevant section of existing legislation rather than to bring forward the withdrawal and implementation bill. It is not for me to make the government's argument for it, and such an argument has not been advanced. It may be that they are thinking that the vote would be a different vote to that which has taken place today, and they may find reinforcement in that view from the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for West Dorset, to give but one example. But I repeat that an emergency business statement with greater clarity and the opportunity for interrogation would have been very considerably more helpful to the House. A point of order, Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As someone who's meant to lead for the Scottish National Party in the supposed Queen's Speech debate on the NHS and trade deals, I simply need to know, am I preparing a speech, as many other members across the House would? You know, there is work planned for Monday and Tuesday, and I think it's incredibly disrespectful that we simply don't know what we're doing on Monday.
I don't want to repeat the position over and over again. I've already indicated that the situation is obviously less than satisfactory, but, you know, I've got an enormous regard for the number and quality of the grey cells of the Honourable Lady. So it seems to me that if she is required at short notice to shift from the penning of one type of speech to the construction of another, and it will be, for her, the equivalent of swatting a hornet. It won't cause her any trouble at all. Point of order, Mary Cray.
Speaker, as the chair of our proceedings here today, can you tell us if it is in order for the government to put a motion before the House today which is effectively defeated and then to retable the exact same motion, hoping for a different result, perhaps in anticipation of certain conversations that may happen over the weekend between the Prime Minister and people who have voted one way, and then and perhaps on the basis of what may or may not appear in the Sunday papers? Is it in order to bring the same motion twice on consecutive days? Do we not have a duty to our constituents and to the country to let this matter rest?
I'm alert to the argument that the Honourable Lady has made. I think the fairest thing to say is, as I have been advised by the clerk, that a ruling on Monday on this matter would be sensible. I must say to colleagues that the Chair seeks to be as dexterous and versatile as possible in attending to colleagues' various points of view and in responding to questions put to the Chair. It cannot always be expected that the Chair will do so immediately when something is raised which had not previously been put to the Chair, of which therefore there was no advance notice, and which has not therefore been discussed with expert advisers. It's perfectly reasonable to seek that expert advice, to discuss it with those so advising, to reflect upon the matter in the cold light of day, and then to come back to the House with an informed as opposed to a speculative conclusion. Point of order, Mr. Martin Whitfield.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker, and I'm cogent of your recent comments. It would seem to me that we had a business statement setting out what was going to happen next week in the normal way. That has now been altered on a point of order, and I'm not entirely personally convinced that that was an appropriate point of order. And if it wasn't, then we have not received notice in this House of what's going to happen on Monday. And my question to the Chair is, are the government able to alter the business on Monday using the method of a point of order, or should an invite not be made for an emergency motion that we could listen to and respond to?
Can put things on the order paper, but I repeat that this was not an emergency business statement. It could have been, but it wasn't. And that is a deeply relevant matter. So although the government can table that which it wishes, it can go to the table office and seek to table propositions, this is not an emergency business statement. And I'm not aware, there are precedents for most things in this House, and they're not for everything, but I can't recall readily an example of a business statement made purely on a point of order. I can recall that it's probably happened from time to time, but in any case, this isn't an emergency business statement as such. It is an indication of intent, but it's not an emergency business statement as such. Point of order, Hugh Gaffney.
Can you clarify, Mr. Speaker, that the amendments to the Queen's speech, which I have one for TV licence, will they still be considered on Monday, and will there be space in the timetable to hear those amendments?
Well, I certainly expect that the Queen's speech debate will be conducted, and it is to be expected that it will be continued. After all, the Leader of the House, who must have contemplated the possible scenarios, in all solemnity, informed the House on Thursday of the business for Monday and Tuesday, and he has not disavowed it. And the nod of the head from the Right Honourable Gentleman confirms that he is not disavowing the intention to continue with the Queen's speech. So I hope that the Honourable Gentleman derives some succour from that fact. It is necessary for him not only to listen to me, but to observe the head movements of the Right Honourable Gentleman Member for North East Somerset. Point of order, Mr. David Linden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, I seek your clarification on a procedural point. Quite clearly, the Leader of the House is not going to bring forward a business statement for the House, and it's quite clear from these proceedings that members wish to question the Leader of the House. Is there a provision within the standing orders to either suspend the House or give you an opportunity to consider an urgent question to the Leader of the House this afternoon in order that we might be able to question him?
Yeah, very good.
Urgent questions are not taken at this time, and I'm not sure that that will greatly advance matters. I will hear remaining points of order, and will reflect on the other point that the honourable gentleman has made. Point of order, Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've not been into the table office, but I understand that the orders of the day for Monday have been tabled, and they don't, in fact, include the Queen's speech debate for Monday. So I'm not sure whether the Leader of the House's nod there meant that we would be having a Queen's speech debate on Monday, or we wouldn't be having a Queen's speech on Monday, because the orders apparently just include debate on the European Withdrawal Act. Obviously, most of us have not had the chance to go to the table office and see this order paper. It would be very useful, Mr. Speaker, if you could in some way compel the Leader of the House to stand up and tell us what that nod meant, whether we are having the Queen's speech debate on Monday or whether we're not having the Queen's speech on Monday, because the details that have been placed in the table office appear to say that we're not having the Queen's speech debate on Monday.
Helpful if the leader would elaborate. If the leader would care to come to the box and elaborate, I think that would be helpful, because at the moment there is extreme ambiguity about intention, and that, if I may very politely say to the leader, cannot be right. The leader.
Mr. Speaker, I think you worry unduly that there will be a full emergency business statement on Monday, which is part of what I was saying, so that people will have a full appreciation of what business there will be. This was made on a point of order because the situation has arisen urgently, and it was important to make it clear to the House straight away what will happen. But as honourable and right honourable members will know, statements come very early in the day, and therefore there will be an opportunity for a full understanding of how business will develop. With regard to the Queen's speech debate, the Queen's speech debate will continue, but Monday will be as I set out on the point of order I raised a few moments ago.
It will be if it's orderly. It will be if it's orderly, and I will reflect upon that matter, and the government isn't the arbiter of what is orderly, as the right honourable gentleman knows, and as I indicated to him in the course of the exchanges on the business question on Thursday. And that is a matter that brooks of no contradiction whatsoever, even if people feel that they are immensely knowledgeable about procedure or have a right to have their own way, or both. They can do so only within the rules. Point of order, Mr. Chris Leslie.
Speaker, further to what appears to be a sort of quasi-business statement from the Leader of the House, which was or wasn't, about matters that the House may be discussing on Monday, but we haven't had proper notice of, nor